We've been looking at the music of Tom Petty. We've looked at it in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and now we're going to turn our attention to the decade of the 2000s. Now, the decade starts with the world being thrown into turmoil after the horrid attacks in New York City. And Tom's way of coping with it is to do what he does best, which is to create memorable songs, great performances, and great memories. So let's take a look at what he and the Heartbreakers are up to in the decade of the 2000s. Let's drop the needle. Tom starts the decade off on a high note, marrying Dana York, first in Las Vegas and then at his home in Malibu, California. And guess who officiates that wedding for him? No one other than the great Little Richard. Then, just 10 days after the attack on the World Trade Center, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers joined an all-star cast to perform a benefit concert called America, a Tribute to Heroes. Tom and the Heartbreakers play an impassioned I Won't Back Down. Seemed only fitting. In October of 2022, Tom and the Heartbreakers start their 11th studio album, which is called The Last DJ. Now, Howie Epstein is missing in action, basically because his drug addiction is getting so horrific. And so Tom realizes they need to do something to replace Howie. And guess what? He calls his old friend and ex-band member, Ron Blair, and says, come on back and be part of the Heartbreakers. And so Ron comes back to join. But he gets into the sessions as they've already recorded most of the tracks. So he plays very little bass on the album because most of it is being played either by Tom Petty or Mike Campbell. The album leads off with the hit, The Last DJ, a stunning rebuke to corporate greed taking over radio. I also like Money Becomes King and Dreamville. And the album reaches number 9 in the U.S. Just after the album is released, Tom and the Heartbreakers fly to London to take part in an all-star concert, the Concert for George. The concert is put together to honor the recent passing of George Harrison. They join Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, Jeff Lynne, George Harrison's son Donnie, and members of Monty Python. Tom and the Heartbreakers play George's songs, Taxman and I Need You, and then the Wilburys, Handle with Care. After returning to the U.S., Tom decides to host his own radio show on XM satellite radio, and he calls it Buried Treasure. And basically what he's doing is he's going back through his personal archives and pulling up music, pretty obscure stuff most of the time, that he really likes, and so he's going to play it on the radio. And Buried Treasure is what inspired me to create the episode that I did just not long ago called Buried Treasure, and here's the link to it in case you want to check it out. In 2006, Tom and the Heartbreakers decide they're going to play another concert, but this isn't really a concert. This is a huge festival. They become the headliners in the 5th edition of the Bonnaroo Festival. Then in 2006, Tom comes up with the idea, hey, it'd be great to do another solo album. So he calls Jeff Lynne to produce it. And they go back in the studio and they release Highway Companion. I like the hits Saving Grace, Flirting with Time, Down South, Big Weekend, and Ankle Deep. Mike Campbell is on this record, but interestingly, there are no other Heartbreakers that make an appearance. The album is a hit, reaching number 1 in the U.S. In 2007, I think Tom is feeling a bit nostalgic, so he decides to reform Mudcrutch, and he calls up Tom Leadon and Randall Marsh, and of course he's working with Benmont Tench and Mike Campbell, and so Mudcrutch comes back together after all these years. The first album is called Mudcrutch. It's released in 2008. These guys had not played together for 32 years. Tom wrote a bunch of the songs. There are some traditional songs, and Benmont and Tom Leadon each write one song. I like their cover of 6 Days on the Road, Crystal River, The Wrong Thing to Do, Lover of the Bayou, and Topanga Cowgirl. The album reaches number 8 on the U.S. chart. But Tom and the Heartbreakers are now a stadium act, and so in 2008, they play the halftime of the Super Bowl. The songs they played include American Girl, I Won't Back Down, Free Fallin', and Running Down a Dream. As the decade is closing, Tom decides to release a box set called the Live Anthology, which is live recordings from 1978 to 2006. Now, as usual, I've created a Spotify playlist where you can listen to some of the songs that I've talked about in this episode. And here's the link, and I'll also put it in the comments below. So for the first decade of the 2000s, once again we find that Tom Petty has been very busy. He finds love and gets married. Then he plays 2 big all-star benefit concerts. And then he also plays the Super Bowl. And somehow he's got time to release a Heartbreakers album and a solo album and bring Mudcrutch back together and have an album come out there and then release a whole bunch of live recordings from his past histories. Pretty busy guy indeed. We're going to move on and keep going and see what happens next in the next episode. But until then, thanks for watching and keep a rockin'. If you liked this episode, hit the like button. And you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.